So, how do you even figure out what it is that brings you peace and joy? Honestly, it's not something I've really thought about in a while, but when I was in the earlier days of both my mental health and my witchcraft journey, I had no clue. And sometimes it's nice to go back and think about just how far I've come. And that's, in a way, what this video is. It's talking about how I went from a person who felt depressed and anxious, who could barely get out of bed, couldn't even take care of herself and her bills, let alone try and hold down a job. I went from her to somebody who is now a full time artist and creator. I have had enough faith in myself to get into an entrepreneurship program for this. And while I still have ups and downs, as I always will, my mental health is in a lot better place. And I know what I want to do with my life. And it wasn't always like this. I think coming from a background of constant struggle, coming from a background of not having enough financially, especially in my childhood and my early 20s and teens, honestly, most of my life. The thought of being able to do something just because it's what I enjoy, I don't think occurred to me for a really long time. And that's honestly a little bit sad. But I'm glad that I've reached this point. I think one of the things that, sorry, I just watched my cat hop right out of camera frame. That was really adorable. Um, I think one of the things that has gotten me to this point was working with my inner child, trying to think about the things that I legitimately enjoyed as a kid. I was always the creative one. I loved art, I loved singing and music and creating stories, even in the days before I could actually write, because, well, that was pretty delayed. But I have just always been this creative person. And there was definitely a time in my early 20s where I found myself pulling away from that, or I found myself trying to force my creativity in ways that weren't aligned, such as writing a bunch of articles while I enjoyed writing fiction or poetry or music. And it took the fun away from that. As I got older, there were a lot of times in my life where I didn't really let myself enjoy art. But there also came a time in my life where I realized most of what I did, most of my thoughts, most of my just daily habits and daily living involved other people. My thoughts about if I should or shouldn't do something involved what would they think of me instead of how would this make me feel. And I think that's a really, really big difference. So when I reached, an all-time low with my mental health, I took that as an opportunity to learn to enjoy my own company, which I've talked about before. But in doing that, it gave me the time to sit with myself, disconnected from things like social media, to learn what actually made me happy. I had to learn what felt good when I was actively doing it. And for me, a lot of that was art. Now, am I always going to want to paint? Maybe not always. I definitely have days every month where, as a full time artist, I don't really feel like doing art, but I don't force myself in those moments. I know that usually the days where I don't feel like doing art is because I'm being pulled towards another creative pursuit. And I try to build my business around that so that it gives me that flexibility. So no matter what, I can always find at least a little moment of peace or joy in my day. And that's really important. So if you're on this journey of trying to figure out what it is that you enjoy, what it is that brings you peace or makes you happy or makes you feel good and excited. I think one thing that you could try doing that I definitely did early on was I got to know myself like I was dating myself. No, but no, bear with me because this can actually be pretty fun. You know, all those questions you see online that you might ask on a first date, like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? Do you like this or that? You know, all that kind of stuff. Where would you go on your ideal vacation? I started asking myself those questions, and it wasn't just a whatever the automatic response was. I sat with it and was like, okay, but do I actually like this? Or do I just think I like this because I've liked this for so long? You know what I mean? The same can be said if you've been in a relationship for a very, very long time and you have this habit of eating pizza every single Friday. But a year later, you're out of that relationship, you're still eating pizza every Friday, and you realize you don't actually like pizza that much or Chinese food, or you know what I mean? That's just an example. But sometimes I find we get in these patterns and routines not because it's necessarily what we want, but it's more what we've gotten used to, what our habits have been. I hope you can't hear my cats meowing too much. Where was I going with that? So, if you find yourself in these times where you really aren't sure what would make you happy, try sitting with yourself, try disconnecting from social media and the perfect reels of perfect lives, because no matter what you see, it's only a fraction. Nobody's life is ever perfect. And figure out what would make your life better. This might mean trying new things. You know, you could have never touched pottery in your life, and on the spur of a moment decide to take a pottery class, and it could be that thing that your life has been missing that brings you so much joy. You won't know until you try. And if pottery is the thing you wanted to try, maybe start with something like polymer clay or air dry clay, because it's similar, but it's a little more accessible without having to take lessons or go somewhere to do it. And the same could be said for anything. If you like singing, try singing more, whether anybody is listening or not. And take a stock, I would say, of your emotions and how you feel in your body physically before and after. Do you notice any changes? Do your shoulders relax? Does it feel easier to breathe? Do you feel just a little bit better, even if it's just a small fraction? Sometimes that tiny little bit better is that little thread that leads to a whole freaking sweater of happiness. I like that. That's fun. Um, but if you pull on that thread, the thing that just, even if you don't know what it is you want, if you follow the little threads that make you just a little bit better, make you feel just a little happier or a little more at peace, where did I leave? Where will it take you? What can you learn from that and expand on? Maybe the thing you try that makes you a little bit happier isn't the thing, but maybe it leads you to it. Maybe you start singing more, and in singing more, you think about picking up a guitar that you've had in your closet for years but haven't played because it's out of tune. You learn to tune the guitar, you have fun with that, you realize it's not exactly what you want, so you try a ukulele, and that is the thing. That is the thing you fall in love with, and it just brings you joy, whether you share it or you keep it just for yourself. And I think that's what a lot of building a life focused on peace and love and happiness can be. It's finding those things that make your days just a little bit better. Maybe it's a wacky piece of art on the wall that just adds a pop of color to your house, because I hope the hitting the microphone isn't too bad. Backtrack here. Because your house is plain and beige and gray and not really bright and poppin', but deep down, that's kind of what you want. You are that fun, bubbly person, and you do like bright colors. Or maybe the opposite's true. Maybe you don't like bright colors and everything's covered in bright colors because you used to like bright colors, but now you'd rather have black roses on your walls. You know, find the things that make you tick, find the things that make you smile or take a deep sigh of relief, even if it's just small at first. See where it leads you, because I know for me, I didn't think art would be my full time living. I spent years thinking that it wouldn't, because who makes a living doing art, you know? And I, that was, I guess, the feedback I would get from the sources around me. Oh, it's fun, but it might bring a little extra cash, but it can't be a full time living. Now I believe in myself enough to know that, yeah, it can be. And yeah, it can make me happy. And yeah, I can be here talking to people on the other side of the screen. And that also makes me happy. This video specifically was inspired by one of those interactions where I shared a bit of my story and got a comment about, like, I don't know what makes me happy. And I was like, you know, valid. I didn't for the longest time either. But taking that time to sit with myself, to do shadow work, to meditate. You know, some days I meditate more than others, but ah, anyways. But in taking that time to learn what I like and what I don't, I've discovered that answer. And the answer wasn't instantaneous. I didn't know within a week of this practice exactly what I wanted to do. But the more I nudged myself towards things that made me happier and away from the things that didn't, the better things got. The less downs I had and the more ups I had, and the shorter those downs, the slumps would last. And in a way, I think that can kind of be said that's what life is about. It's about making the most of things, it's about finding what makes you happy. And I know that's not everyone's take on what life is, but it definitely is mine. In the words of Marsha Linehan, I am building a life worth living. I am building a life that makes me happy, that I want to wake up to every single day. And I'm just grateful that I've gotten to this point. So go find what makes you happy. Or if you already know, let me know so I can cheer you on the whole way. You've got this. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I hope you have an amazing day.